this is how this channel started. I made this channel because I was trying to escape this house. But then a couple of people who were close to my mother tried to convince me that my mother loved me because they were the closest. She had given them the sob story. They thought, if only Natasha knew that her mother loved her so much, she's just got it wrong. She's got it wrong. Let's not ask her why she did what she did and feels the way she does. Let's not let her explain her experience. Let's just keep gaslighting her and telling her that she's wrong about her experience because her mother told me she loves her. They were the ones that I ended up telling, I'm sorry, but she fooled you. When someone loves you, they don't do the things that my mother did. When someone who's been harassing and stalking you for years and has zero respect for your boundaries and has sabotaged your happiness for decades dies, you feel relief. I want to start this video by saying thank you to everyone who left a comment on my last video about Nala passing. I think it was probably a lot to do with the relatable stories that helped me to recognize that I couldn't keep her alive forever and that this is a thing that happens. This is part of life, and it helped me to let go of much of the pain. So thank you. I really appreciate your kind words and your comments on that video. Thank you. The next thing that I want to say before we get into this video is a warning, because I know that a lot of people who either are not familiar with narcissistic abuse, who haven't experienced it, or even some people who are experiencing it or are even narcissists themselves, who probably think this behavior is normal. But mostly I'm concerned for people who are going to see some of the things that I say and see it as your mother was just trying to care about you and giving you gifts and everything else I made up in my head. I want to make it clear that since she passed and I came back here, I was able to validate with evidence the things that I felt like were going on. I ended up having proof when I came back here. For example, the mail, I thought she was opening my mail when I got back. When I got here, I found my open mail in her purse. So that was true. Another thing, I felt that she was getting people to spy on me to get information. When I went through her text messages, I saw that that was true. So the feelings that I had, that I knew something was going on, I have evidence now to support that that was true. So it's not just about some kind of a paranoia thing or me twisting reality. These are things that I have evidence for. Some people are going to see some of the things that she did as being a loving mother who's just afraid for my safety, but and that's trying to help me and give me gifts. But in reality, what was going on was that I was being infantilized and controlled, and she was trying to keep me here, literally in the house, to the point where if you watch my first couple of videos, you see where I was so afraid to leave the house because I had been brainwashed that if I left the house, something bad would happen, that I felt responsible for literally staying in the house all the time, because if I left, that someone would try to break in or cause damage to the house or whatever. That's the level of brainwashing that was going on. So this slow, passive, covert type of indoctrination, these seemingly small things over a long period of time, repeated over and over again, plant these seeds in your brain that you don't even understand what's going on. So for example, how she would always refer to, which you'll see in the video, how she would always refer to home being her house. Wherever I lived was never home, but home, as in my home, was always her house. She would always tell me to go home or to come home to her house, which may not seem like anything much, but it sends the message that wherever I was never my home. As an adult moving into an apartment or wherever, that was never my home, that I would only be home when I was back in her house. So it's so subtle, but it has a deep impact. There's a lot of things that I don't even understand yet because I'm still unpacking them. I'm still processing my feelings. Even tonight before I filmed this particular part of the video, I had revelations about my past that I didn't realize before. So I'm still unpacking all the damage that was done because it was so subtle and because I was so saturated in it from birth, and I didn't have positive influences around me to show me anything better, or what healthy family is supposed to be like, or what healthy living is supposed to be like. I didn't know. I didn't have any reference. So it was very easy to plant seeds into my brain that would grow into these beliefs that were a mind trap. For my entire life, she would dissuade me from filing for any kind of social assistance. So even when I was here in the story you're about to hear, when I was here, I should have at least had welfare coming in or some sort of disability thing. But she had brainwashed me to not apply for it, that it was always a bad thing or something that was impossible to get. She would always talk to me as some sort of an authority, that she knew that it wasn't going to work, and that's not the way you're supposed to do things, that kind of thing. That brainwashed me out of being an adult and being able to provide for myself and being able to leave this house. So while I was here giving her years of my life while she was supposedly supposed to be going through a divorce that never happened, it was never my responsibility in the first place to help her fix it. She was a fully capable adult that should have been the one to solve her own problems. And yet I felt responsible for fixing her problems. That's another part of covert abuse or narcissistic abuse, is they can make you feel responsible for their life. So I was infantilized, and I was also parentified. So I was either not allowed to be an adult, or I had to also be her parent, depending on the moment, or both at the same time. I thought about whether or not I was going to post this video on this channel, especially what would be the purpose of posting this video. And I know that I'm probably going to get a lot of hate on this video, and so be it, because I'm not posting this for the haters. I don't post anything for the haters. I'm posting this video on this channel because this is how this channel started. I made this channel because I was trying to escape this house and free myself from abuse and to heal from it. And it's been a couple years and I'm back at this house. And so I need to tell my story to the people who've been following me through it. And also, a lot of you are those who've experienced narcissistic abuse or are still experiencing narcissistic abuse. And that is why I'm putting this out, because I feel like telling these stories, having more real first-hand experiences, help us understand our own situation. Just like I said, I'm still unpacking the damage. I'm still processing what happened to me and realizing, oh wow, that was really messed up. Oh my God, they did that to me. It wasn't my fault when I was, 21 years old and they treated me like all these things were my fault, and they actually just destroyed my life. So I'm putting this out there to help other people unpack their own trauma, to help them understand, hey, maybe what I'm experiencing feels bad for a reason. Maybe what I'm experiencing is not normal, it's not healthy. It might be common, but it's not healthy. So, with that said, I'm posting this super long video with my story, or part of my story of my situation with my mother, all the way up until now. If you saw my last video, then you know that my cat Nala passed away around Christmas, and literally a couple of days afterwards my mother died. If you've been watching my videos, you've probably heard me say multiple times that the reason I left Squamish was because I knew something was pulling me here. Something, I felt it in my gut. It was not a conscious decision more than some sort of divine guidance to come here. And I remember explaining it as I felt like I had to be here for Christmas because you never know when it's going to be someone's last Christmas. And, well, it was someone's last Christmas. I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything, where I am right now. This is absolutely crazy. If you've been following me from the beginning, or if you go back and watch the first vlogs, I was here in this house. This is the couch that she cut up with a knife. This is the house that I started my journey in because I was trying so hard to escape. 2 years ago or so, I was living in this house with my narcissistic mother and my father, who they were still married at the time of her death, was off gallivanting with his mistress or whatever he was doing, half living with his mistress, whatever. And now it's the complete opposite, where she's gone and I'm living with my father, technically, because he's not here right now for the same reasons. I'm living in a world where everyone is doing, and they're doing the craziest, stupidest, most immoral stuff. And everyone around them, everyone around me just pretends it's not happening. And like, I'm supposed to come on here and pretend it's not happening. Why don't we hear more people openly talking about the reality, the real BS? Is it because it's so rare, or is it because people are manipulated into silence? Both of my parents are narcissists. In 2009, I realized my father was a narcissist. It's such a long story, and I may have told it in a previous video, but essentially, I got caught up in a cult. And at the time, synchronistically, I was writing a book because I started recognizing certain cult attributes within an activist movement that I was involved in. And that was separate from the cult that I got caught up in. It was just very synchronistic. And as I was researching the book that I was writing, I started learning about cults, which led me to narcissistic personality disorder, because all cult leaders are narcissists. And when I started learning about narcissistic personality disorder, that's when I recognized my father. And I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense now. Like, my whole life just started making more sense. And at the time, there was far less people talking about narcissism back then, and far less information, quality information out. And I was learning about this dynamic where in a narcissistic relationship, there's generally the narcissist, and then their victim or target is like someone with codependency issues. And that was the dynamic that I was learning about. I didn't realize at the time, I didn't have more information that would have told me that there are dynamics with two narcissists being together. So at the time, because my father was so overtly narcissistic and abusive, I assumed that my mother, because I knew that my mother was, you know, always getting yelled at and whatever, she was very good at being a victim. So I had assumed that she was just codependent. And so I explained to her what I found. Like, I was the scapegoat at that time, at that point. I was the scapegoat in the family. When I told my mother what I found about narcissistic personality disorder, and I started reading her the traits, she dismissed it, changed the subject, that kind of thing. She didn't react to it the way that I assumed that she would react. And I still didn't fully understand why she reacted that way until years later. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I started realizing that there was something wrong with my mother too. I, for the longest time, just thought maybe she's just really dumb. Like maybe, like there's got to be a reason why she's doing this, and I'm explaining her things and she keeps doing the thing, or there's a problem that can be solved but she just won't solve it, or she sabotages the solution, and also she only remembers things she wants to remember, and also she, even though I'm telling her that I don't like something, or I don't like being treated a certain way, or that I'm being abused, she will still continue to subject me to all of those things. I'm like, my mother must be really dumb. Like she must just be really dumb. And that may sound mean, but that was the better option out of the two, because I'm just trying to wrap my head around the motivation behind her actions. So I just felt bad for her for the longest time, because she was just really good at pulling on your heartstrings and making you feel like she's suffering and struggling and the victim and she needs help. And so I would always be the one to help her at my own expense. And that was the hardest part, because I kept explaining to her that when whatever I was giving up to help her, it would be one thing if I could help her and then things changed and we all moved on and started healing together. But I would just give and give and give of myself and sabotage my own life, or my life would be sabotaged out of a sacrifice to try to help her. But she would never be helped. She would never change. She would never solve problems. It was just this black hole for my energy and my efforts. At some point, I recognized that she wasn't respecting my boundaries. I still didn't understand that she was a narcissist and everything else, but I understood that she wasn't respecting my boundaries, meaning I had gone no contact with my father, and I moved away and all these things, and I was trying to separate my life from him. But I was trying to maintain a relationship with my mother, thinking that she understood, because she accepted that, I didn't like how he was treating me and all these things. So she said. But then she would call me, and the call would always be a barrage of guilt trips and manipulation and whatever she told me. But then it would make me feel like garbage. She would try to get me to go back home, and just all these things just to make me feel bad. But she would always say, oh, your father said that, or your father told me to tell you that, or your father did a thing. And so she was using him as an excuse to hurt me. And I thought she was being used as a proxy. I thought he was using her to get to me, but she was using him as an excuse to hurt me. And I didn't understand that for a very long time. So at the point where I understood that she was crossing my boundaries, meaning I would tell her to stop talking about certain things, stop bringing him up, stop doing whatever, and she wouldn't do that. So anyways, at this point that I'm recognizing that she has absolutely no respect for my boundaries. None. No respect for my boundaries. Please don't bring me stuff I don't want. Please don't talk about things that make me uncomfortable. Please don't get between me and my father and bring him up and be a proxy. None of my boundaries were being respected, so I went no contact with her as well. I went no contact with her for a couple of years. And because I did not realize that she was a narcissist, after a couple of years, I don't remember right now what the situation was, but I opened the door again because I had nobody. That's another thing about when you deal with narcissistic parents, you end up with nobody. When you're the scapegoat or when you're the target, you end up with nobody. And I'll get into that in a bit to explain how that happens. But I wanted family. I wanted connection. And so I let my guard down with her. And I started talking to her again. And I didn't realize that she was a narcissist. Because what narcissists do when you start talking to them again is they act like how you've always wanted them to act. Suddenly they're respecting your boundaries. Suddenly they're being nice to you or whatever it is. They're being humble or whatever it is. They are a different version of themselves, and you can tell yourself that they've grown and that they've learned and they're different now. And I made that mistake multiple times with both of my parents. I'm not making that mistake this time with my father, I'll tell you that. So because I had her in my life again, she was still manipulating me and destroying my self-esteem in ways that are so covert, especially when you've grown up in abuse. Your standards are really low for how you expect to be treated, for what you expect from other people. It's so easy. You've been gaslighted for so many years, your entire life. It's so easy to put you in an environment where you're being abused and you rationalize it, or you make excuses for it, or you accept it and you're quiet about it. And that happened to me again this year. And I'm going to talk about that too, but maybe not in this video. At this one point, I got it in my head that I was going to break free from the dead-end 9-to-5 stuff that I was doing at the time. And I took all the skills and experience that I had from my past, and I put them together to try to make this thing happen so that I didn't have to go back to this job that I hated. And the problem is, it doesn't matter how much skills you have or knowledge you have or energy you have or whatever it is, if you have subconscious mental blocks keeping you down. And in my mind, I had internalized my abuse. So even though I had accomplished things in my life, and I knew that I could do a thing, again, because I had done it in the past, I didn't believe in myself. There was a part of myself that, even though I knew logically that it was totally doable for me, I was dragging my feet or making bad decisions or going in a direction that was away from where I should have been spending my time, or just doing things. I was basically sabotaging myself because I didn't believe I didn't truly believe in myself and my ability to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish, because I had been told for so many years that I would never do anything on my own. I couldn't succeed on my own. I'm a loser. I will always come back home because I can't succeed on my own. Any job that I ever get, I'll be fired. Just all the things. They used to tell me those things, and it was so confusing to me. And I would write things down because it would tell me, you didn't do anything all day. All you do is you just lay in bed and you don't do anything all day. And so I started writing down all the things that I did during the day, because I would get confused and forget about what I did. And then I could read back the list of things and be like, no, I did this and I did that and I did that and I did that and I did that. And I realized that what they were telling me was not true. But all of the things that they said, and even the things that the way that they treat you, they don't always say a thing, but sometimes it's the not saying anything or the things that they do that are so passive that if you told someone about it, they would think you're crazy because it doesn't sound like abuse. But It absolutely is. If people treat you like you're invisible or that you don't matter, or I'll give you an example. Hopefully I don't derail myself from this timeline. But, being back here with my father, who's not currently here, but meaning when I was first here, he was here. And he was in that mode of trying to, get my guard down. Or I won't even say hoover me. Maybe that's what it is. But, I had said at one point that my stomach hurt or that I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't really true, but it's a long story. But I said I wasn't feeling well, and in a text, and he just never responded. And even recently, I sent him a text asking him a question, and he never responded to my question. He texted me back about something else, but he just never responded to my question. And that's what he does. If it's relevant to him, he'll answer. If it's not relevant to him, he doesn't care. And so if I told somebody about that, be like, yeah, well, I told my father I wasn't feeling well and he didn't text me back. Anyone else would be like, oh, maybe he just didn't think of it, or maybe he was busy, blah, blah, blah. But when someone does that to you consistently for years, you internalize that as I don't matter. And so when you're sick, you don't tell anybody because it doesn't matter. Because you've learned that other people, the people around you, won't care. And that's something that happened to me all my life, to the point where I could have been half dead and no one cared. I could have been just so many terrible things that happened to me and no one cared. And so you internalize that, and to the point where you bring that into the world with you, and you start thinking that you just don't matter to anyone, because everyone around you in that toxic dynamic, everyone around you at home didn't care. So why would anyone care? Because this is the part that a lot of people forget, is that a narcissist doesn't exist in a vacuum. So when people say, oh, your mother was abusive and your father was abusive, everyone's abusive. Oh, you're just making it up because why are you always the victim and everybody's just abusing you? You're just making it up. No. Narcissists don't exist in a vacuum. So when you have one, you have many. Or at the very least, you have a dynamic that came from a family of people who fostered that, who created that monster. So they themselves are either abusers or abuse enablers or some other aspect of this toxic dynamic. It is a cesspool. So yes, I am a target from a lot of people, because it's not just my parents, then it's the people around them, they're flying monkeys, the extended family who's heard the smear campaign, who is also, again, the family tree of toxic dynamic, the family tree of narcissists, handing it down to the next generation. Abusers and abuse enablers, handing it down to the next generation, and, extending out the aunts, uncles, cousins, whatever. High, low, up, down, right, left, whatever. All around, the whole entire family system is full of toxic people. Not everyone, but the environment is so toxic that even people who are not abusers get caught up in the environment where they make excuses for the toxic behavior. And they don't see it clearly because they're so used to it. And again, their standards are low because that's all they know. So yeah, and then you internalize the abuse and you go out into the world and then you interact with other people with that internalized abuse, and abusers see that in you. They test you and they see how you react. And then if you react in a certain way, And you react in that way because that's what you've grown up with. You've been gaslighted your whole life. So you think certain things are normal. You think you deserve to be treated a certain way. You think that if people treat you like crap, that they really love you, that kind of thing. And so when you get tested, you pass the test in terms of being filtered into the basket of targets, of potential targets. And so all the narcissists around you they're testing everyone. But because you grew up in that dynamic, you're the one that they're like, oh, that one. And then those narcissists are friends with other narcissists. They're in a network of narcissists because they have to hang out with people on their level who value the same things. And people who value the same things as a narcissist are generally narcissist or narcissistic or victims falling for the traps. That's how it works. So yes, I'm targeted by a lot of narcissists because that's how I grew up, and that is the energy that I've been trying to heal. And also there's the fact that I'm most likely on some level autistic or whatever. Like that's my theory about myself. And one day I will get tested, probably posted as a video. But also, people who are neurodivergent tend to get targeted a lot. I was talking about how with their passive behavior of how they treat you, it doesn't have to be overt abuse, but in treating you like you're nothing, you start to believe that you're nothing. So when I'm doing this project this years ago and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get this done, and I'm not gonna have to go back to this 9-to-5 that I hate. I had low points, never mind just the mental self-sabotaging aspects of it. Even when I was trying to push through, I was having low points because that is what it's like when you try to do anything important, great, whatever. You have low points, you have bad days, you have moments where it feels like it's too hard and you're not going to do it and whatever. And in those moments, you need people around you who are going to boost you up and be like, no, listen, you came so far, you got to see it through. Like even if you don't get to the end, look what everything you've done, and you've learned a lot. You're gonna do great. Even if it doesn't turn out how you thought, you should just keep pushing through, keep fighting for it, whatever. Someone to boost you up when you're too low to hold yourself up. And my mother was the type of person that when I was low would push me down. She would just tell me to give up on myself. And she would tell me in a way where I thought that she was helping me. Just give up. Just let it go. Why are you doing this? Just come home. Just, you're wasting your time, that kind of thing. Just come home. And again, I didn't go back then because that's not what I wanted. And I felt terrible, obviously. She was always trying to hoover me back home. And a couple years later, after I had started doing a whole lot of self-love work on myself, self-healing, I had this moment where I was moving from one condo to another, and it was the first place that I was leaving was a nightmare. So I couldn't stay there, and I had already given my notice. I had found another place. It was close to the old place. Everything was signed. I gave them my check, and everything was done, ready to go. My stuff was packed. Everything was done in advance because I don't like to do things last minute. The day or 2 days before the first, that was moving day, I went, so the building was mostly vacant. It was a brand new building. And I told this story before, so I'm just telling the nutshell. I went to this building and I went to go get my keys, and the building manager refused to give me the keys unless I signed 2 more contracts. And I knew right away, first of all, he had no right to do that. Second, it was extortion, which is illegal. And then I read through the contracts and I'm like, wow, this is not fair at all. And then I went up to the apartment or the condo that I had signed for, that I hadn't even seen, because when I had rented it, I didn't, like, it wasn't fully constructed yet, which, don't do that. Whatever. And when I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, this porch would be very dangerous for my cats. And how am I going to get my furniture through this doorway? Why they didn't build it right? And I'm just like, I'm gonna have to give up my couch. My cats are not gonna be safe. And now this guy's extorting me. It was just like an all around no-go. It was a do not move here, big red flag situation. So I couldn't go back to the old place. It was too late there. I couldn't go to the new place, and I had like 1 day to figure it out. I would have had to choose a place last minute very quickly, which means that I may have gotten bed bugs. I may have gotten whatever. It would have been a very bad situation that I would have been pressured into without being able to properly verify that the place was good. And so I had one other option, which was to go back home. And I was talking to my mother again, telling me to go back home. And I said, I don't want to live with my father because my father is abusive. And she convinced me because she said, he's barely ever here because he travels so much for work. Okay. I ended up going back home, which was, again, I'm sure, by design, like by my soul's design, very synchronistically. It was divinely orchestrated because of everything that played out afterwards. So this is just a nutshell. I moved back there. My father, both of my parents are doing the whole being ultra nice thing. Then my grandmother visits. I spend some really good quality time with my grandmother. And again, I just knew. I just know. I will get to that, I think, in a minute. But I'm starting to realize that I'm a medium, and I think that I've been pushing it away like my whole life for a couple of reasons. One, because the thought of seeing ghosts scared me, and another is because I thought that it was egoic of me to be like, oh, I'm a medium. And that I was, I'm like, who am I? Who am I to be a medium? Like, what is that? Why would I even say that I'm a medium? And that's a whole another thing about self-trust. But now I'm starting to realize that I think it really is true, like very much so. And anyways, when my grandmother was here, I kept getting these signs to like, make sure, just go spend the day with her, or you keep procrastinating, you keep putting off singing for her, go now. Like, we're just sitting, it was super random. We were sitting in the living room on the couch, and I just got that message, and I'm just like, okay. So I went and I sang for her, and I'm just like, I just knew I had to do it because that was going to be my last opportunity to do it. And I knew that I was spending so much time with her for a reason. This is 2017, I think. So then she leaves, and I start making plans to leave here because I had moved here. I forget the dates. I had been there like either less than a year, I think, or a year, something like that. And so the plan was for me to come here until I could get another place and then move there. But I come here, all this stuff starts to happen. This is just part of it, my grandmother thing. So she left, and then a couple months later, I told her that I really felt called to go to the mountains. I really felt like I needed to go to the mountains. So that was my plan. I'm going to just, downsize and go to the mountains. And she's like, awesome, cool, I'm going to help you. She didn't say it like that. Awesome, cool. She was like, okay, I'm going to help you find an apartment. I would love that. If you were closer, that would be great. A couple weeks later, she was in the hospital, and maybe a few weeks after that, she had passed. She had an aggressive form of cancer, stage 4, and it just took her out really quickly. And I just knew when she was here, I just knew. Within a couple of months, we found out that my father was having a full-blown affair, which also started to expose all the other affairs that he's had throughout their entire marriage. This is not like, I know some people are like, oh, that's their business, that's their, their relationship, and sometimes, blah, 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 and people aren't happy. No, that's not what was happening. My father was an abuser who was cheating on my mother from the very inception of their relationship. So that we find out that he is having an affair, and then it really starts validating all the other things that have happened and starts putting pieces together in my life where I'm like, oh, that's why he used to like bring us to bowling and then just disappear, and stuff like that for like my whole life. Then, everything got real crazy. And then I was supposedly, so instead of moving out, now I'm here supposedly helping my mother through a divorce that never happened ever, several years later. And again, my mother became the black hole where I was giving all of myself to her to try to help her, but instead of being helped, instead of solving problems and moving on and healing, she would not. She would sabotage every bit of effort, every potential solution. She would sabotage everything. She did not want things to get better because narcissists thrive in chaos. They want chaos. They want the drama. They want things to be a living nightmare. So my life became a living nightmare as I thought that I was doing the right thing in helping my mother through a difficult time that just never ended. And at no point did anyone, not even myself, consider how many years of my life that I was giving up to try to help her solve a problem she didn't want to solve. And, again, going back to the thing about narcissistic mothers want their daughters to fail. They hate their daughters. They're in competition with their daughters. And it's passive. You don't see it. It's covert. But my whole life, so draining me of these years was making sure that I never succeeded, that my business that I had been working on and devoting my life to never took off, that I never had time or energy to make YouTube videos, that I never had access to the car after she promised me that if I made this move here into the suburbs, that I would have access to the car to be able to go to a different job. Just anything she could do to make it more difficult for me. That is what she did to make sure that I did not succeed, and that to try to make sure that I couldn't leave her, especially since my father was gone gallivanting with his mistress, just as he's doing now. That I had become her primary source of narcissistic supply. And so I wasn't allowed to leave. And I recognize now that I understand everything a little better, looking back at my life, I recognize of how she literally, every chance she could get, sabotaged my love life so that I could never have a relationship, get married, move on, have a life of my own. And from everything from reading my tarot cards, and every time she would read my cards, every single time, so like You're a young girl. What do you want to know about? The only thing young girls want to know about most of the time is some love interest. And she would always make it a point to tell me that every male figure in my cards was always my father. And I even brought that up once, and I'm like, you're always telling me every male figure in my cards is my father. It's never a love interest. It's never this man who likes me or my future husband. It's always my father. And so then she throws in oh, this is your brother, or this is your uncle. And at a couple times she knew that the question, like I would ask the question, but I wouldn't ask her the question. I would ask it in my head, and then the cards would give you the answer, blah, blah, blah. And a couple times she'd recognize that the question that I was asking was, even though I didn't tell her the specifics, it was about a love interest. And she told me, oh, it's about the other woman, this other woman, another woman is going to decide, not you, it's another woman that's going to decide, oh, he's not interested, he's looking at another woman. Every time. So I didn't realize it back then. I was young, I was naive, whatever. But she was just indoctrinating me. It's again the same thing as that passive thing where people treat you like you don't matter, so you start to believe you don't matter. I started to believe that no one ever liked me, no one ever crushed on me, no one was ever interested in me, that I was just never going to have love in my life, and that having love in my life was just completely abnormal. It was just not a thing that was ever going to happen. To the point where when my brother had his first kid, I get to the hospital and I go in there, and my brother's happy as a clam, with his kid and stuff. But him and my mother, so it was just like him, his wife, and my mother, and the baby, obviously. And my brother turns to me and says, when are you going to have kids? Like, he was excited, like, oh, this is so great. He didn't realize what he was saying, but this is exactly the point. But he was like, when are you going to have kids? It's great to have kids. And I'm just like, I'm like not in any position to have a kid, right? Like, why would you? It's like if I had been in a relationship for a while and they're like, hey, when are you and so gonna have kids? I feel like that would make sense. And I know that my brother was just excited and he was like, this is a good thing, when are you gonna do this good thing? But it's not about that. It's about the fact that everyone around me never acknowledged that maybe I wanted a love life. Like, to the point where it was so that extremely absent in their minds, the idea that Natasha would have a love life, that he wouldn't recognize the discrepancy between the having a kid and like the things you got to do to have the kid part. And I was just like, it was just strange. And I don't blame him at all. I know he was saying that like joyfully, but I was just like, no one asks me, when are you, hey, do you have a boyfriend? Hey, are you seeing someone? Nothing. So having a kid would be normal, but having a man in my life that I would have a kid with is just not a thing that people see in me. When they look at me, they're just like, they don't see me as someone who would be in a relationship, because that would be weird. At my mother's funeral, my childhood friend was there. And I recognized that for years I had feelings for him. And since I was really young, like we knew each other for epically long, like since we were little. And my mother would always tell me things like, stay away from him, because he's like your brother, and that would be weird and bad and gross, and just don't remember, he's like your brother, but he wasn't like my brother. He was my age, not my brother's age, and he wasn't my brother, and I liked him. And he's a good guy. Like, he's a good guy. He wasn't the type to, he wasn't like the bad guy that your parents are supposed to warn you about. He's a good guy. Like, I don't think that we would be I'm pretty damn sure that we wouldn't be a good match now. It probably would never have worked out in the long run, but a lot of relationships don't work out. It doesn't mean that you're not supposed to have them for a short period of time for whatever you get out of that. But just to say that he was a good guy, and she constantly sabotaged this potential love between myself and someone I really liked who was a good guy. So all these things that I experienced through my entire life that were constantly sabotaging me from being happy. And I didn't notice until like a year into the pandemic that my mother was doing it on purpose, because she's a narcissist. She was never the innocent victim with codependency issues that was being abused by my father. She was another narcissist, and they were abusing each other. I think from the point where I noticed that she was a narcissist, and therefore I started backing away. Like, I started having more boundaries and not falling for her games anymore, and not putting up with her crap anymore, and not listening to her endlessly whine and cry about stupid crap that she could easily fix and just didn't want to. And because my behavior changed, hers changed, and she started to lose her grip on me. She started to lose control over me, because before that, I felt sorry for her. I felt like I had to help her, and I gave everything to her. And when I realized what was going on, it was like I snapped out of it, and she felt that she lost her grip. And so she started escalating. And I've made multiple videos showing you the process of that escalation, essentially, where I started to recognize that she was sabotaging me in ways to try to make me dependent, or demoralize me, or to scare me into feeling helpless on my own, or to feel guilty and like I owe her. You know, with this couch, I noticed here, so I had made a whole video about this early on. You can go watch it. I won't get into the whole thing, but so I was watching Spot. It was the one, how she had been coming in. So Spot never used to scratch furniture before that whole debacle, but that's a whole other thing. So I was watching Spot recently, and these couches are absolute in tatters at this point. I know you can't see it here, but they're in tatters, so I just don't care anymore. And plus, my mother's dead and my father's an asshole, so who cares? Who cares? This is my couch now. So I was watching Spot interact with the couch, and how much effort she put into trying to stick her claws in there, and just how little the little marks were. And it just really, really validated to me what happened. So either she showed Spot how to do it, like she tried to condition the cat to scratch the couch after I put years into conditioning to not do that, or she did it on her own, and my mother saw her do it and saw it as an opportunity and made the holes bigger, because the holes that my mother made with a knife after the cat made a little, tink, little hole. my mother really went at the couch with a knife. Like, there is no way that one of the cats did that. Like, giant gashes and like the stuffing coming out and stuff like that. No way. No way. It was 100% definitely my mother did that with a knife. And she did that. She did things like that because she wanted me to feel bad and like I owed her. Or to just, have a reason to be superior than me or whatever it is. But I think it was to shame me, to guilt trip me, so that I felt like I had to buy her a new couch, or whatever it was, which means that I would have to, it's like how pimps work. So to the best of my knowledge, the indentured servitude thing. So they will, I'm probably not going to describe this right, but they give you money, and then so you owe them, and then they're like, well, you can pay me back by doing, doing whatever, and so you do whatever, but then you owe them the money plus interest, but they take their cut and your cut, and then you owe them money, interest, and then, oh, well, I drove you to the thing, so now you owe me gas money, or whatever it is, right? Just this like compounding debt that you can never possibly pay off. It's like just an impossible situation. That's probably a terrible explanation for what a pimp does, but I think you get my point. Just an impossible situation. So it's like, now I owe her a couch, but I can't buy the couch because I can't leave to get the job, to get the money to buy the couch, but I can't leave to get the job because I have to stay here because I owe her a couch. Weird mind games. Like, logically, obviously it's a simple fix. Logically, all of these things are a simple fix. But these are the mind games of shame and guilt and manipulation and demoralization and isolation. All these things that make you feel trapped in your mind because of the situation that they put you in and the financial situation that they put you in, which makes you often literally trapped. Telling me, before I moved here, I explained to her the situation. Well, when I'm in the city, I can use the bus and metro. But if I move to where you are, everything's really far away and I don't have a car. And her explanation was, well, I'm retiring in a couple months, so you can use the car all the time. And what happened was, yes, she retired, and then she kept using the car every day to go, do favors for my brother and whatever else, because golden child gets everything. And so I get stuck at home. And so I'm trying to make money online because I feel like I can't leave because I don't have a car. And if I take the bus, it'll take me 2 hours to get anywhere. And I'm physically exhausted because I have fibromyalgia and insulin resistance and all these problems making me physically tired and in pain all the time. It's like, if you ask an ill person, a sick person, or an elderly person to do the same, to meet the same physical requirements as a 20-year-old, and be like, well, the 20-year-old does it all the time, why don't you do it? Like, what are you, lazy? No, it's not about laziness. It's about how incredibly much it taxes you to do that. So I'm just trying to find a solution, and every time I try to find a solution, it just gets harder because my illness is getting worse from living in constant stress. One example of how she was adding to my illness to make it harder for me is I had tried going keto because of my blood sugar and my fibromyalgia and all of that. I know that if you cut carbs, that it goes away. But when I cut carbs, she was taking my food, my meat and my fish and whatever else, and she was hiding it or eating it or whatever so that I would have to eat carbs. Because then I would stay sick, because God forbid I got healthy. And then she would go and order fast food or restaurant food and bring it back frequently. So she was doing things to keep me sick, to keep me overweight, to keep me in the house, to keep me under her thumb. Meanwhile, there's a smear campaign that I didn't know about, because that's how narcissists work, is they smear you the entire time so that when you finally leave, everyone believes that the abuser is the victim. And I didn't recognize that that's what she was doing. When inside the house, I was doing pretty much everything. And then outside of the house, she would do it. So if it snowed, even though she didn't have to, so she would always be the one to take out the garbage. I would do everything else, but she had to be the one to take out the garbage and the recycling. Why? Because the neighbors could see her. So if it snowed, I offered, because I couldn't physically do it, I offered to get someone else to do it or to pay for someone else to do it or whatever else. She said no. She would do it, and she would go get a shovel, and she would be out there like, oh, oh, oh. Like she's just struggling away, just this poor lady just shoveling snow all by herself, and her lazy, mean daughter is inside when I couldn't do it, and I offered to pay someone else to do it. But she orchestrated it so that the neighbors all saw her being a martyr. They saw her doing everything because she took the garbage out and she shoveled the driveway. Meanwhile, inside, I'm the one doing the dishes 7 times a day and whatever the hell else, because the dishwasher's broken and they refuse to get a new one. They refuse to get a new dishwasher. And I know a lot of people don't have dishwashers, but you know, I lived in a van. I didn't have a dishwasher. But the point is that they can buy a dishwasher, and they have a dishwasher. They have the space and the hookups for the dishwasher, but that dishwasher has been broken for like a decade, and they refuse to get a new one. And so I'm left washing the dishes by hand multiple times a day and everything, whatever else, okay? So inside it's me that nobody sees. Outside it's her that everybody sees. So everyone thinks she's the martyr. And then she went to the store and spent money she didn't have, and then she would go out and she would give things to people. Oh, I went to the store. I thought of you. Oh, I'm going to the store. Do you need anything? And she would buy people groceries, which it's a good thing when people need things to give them things. That's a good thing. But her primary motivation was so that people thought that she was an angel martyr and the innocent one, so that anytime she talked shit about anyone else, they would believe her. Because why would she lie? She's so nice. She's so nice. What do you mean your mom's an abuser? She's so nice. So I'm going to say something gross now. If you're eating, don't watch this next part. Fast forward a couple seconds or whatever. But the last day that I was here, or the last couple days, at least the last week, the thing that really got me to just go, instead of stop procrastinating, no more, well, you know, if I take a couple more days, I could do this in the van, or when I take a couple more days, I could, you know, whatever. I was like, no, now's the time. Is she killed a spider right beside the stove and left it there. So I would go into the kitchen and there would be a big dead spider right beside where I'm supposed to cook. I was so incredibly disgusted, and I know she left it there as like a superiority thing. Well, now you clean it up or whatever it is, right? But I was so disgusted that instead of cleaning it up and moving on, I'm just like, I have to go. I cannot live here one more day. And that was my last straw. That's when I left. The entire time I was in the van, she was stalking me. And I knew she was. Like I could just like I know things. I knew she was. Beyond the things that I knew tangibly, I just knew. You know, like my uncle would call me after I posted a video, every time I posted a video, and yet he didn't even know what my YouTube channel was. And I thought, that's weird. And I confronted him about it. He's like, no. Eventually he admitted that, yes, she was getting him to call me to get information. She was using other people to spy on me. She was keeping my mail that went to the house and opening it. So she was going through my mail. She was putting money into my bank account so that, which I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, that's so nice. Well, that made me ineligible for social services because I was getting help from family, which meant that I was under her thumb, and that if I changed my bank account, I would have to have no income, no social services income, and no income from her for 3 months. 3 months before I was eligible again. And because everything was so fragile at the time, you watched my journey, that I just didn't do it until this past year. And it was degrading. It was degrading. And then I get to the middle of the summer, and I start feeling this pull to come back to Montreal, as I said, because I knew I had to be here. And somehow, which I'll explain the whole thing in a different video because it's a whole nother thing, I ended up in my hometown, down the street from her, essentially, like really close to their house on the day that she died. I went from Vancouver to my particular hometown on the day that she died, on the opposite side of the country. And I had been mentally mourning her for years because I knew that when I went no contact this time, understanding that she was a narcissist, there was no going back. There was no, well, maybe one day we'll work it out. No. She had proven to me that there was no possibility that she would ever change, that things were ever going to get better, that she would ever suddenly start respecting my boundaries, that she ever wanted anything to get better. There was no way for reconciliation, despite what everybody else thought. So when she died, it did not faze me, because in my mind, I had already gone through that process. I already cried. I already mourned and mentally accepted that she was no longer in my life. And there were people around me that had been subject to the smear campaign, who saw the way that I was reacting and were not okay with it. They were mad at me. They were mad at me for not being sadder. I have the right to react to my mother's death any way I damn well please. No one else gets to tell me how I react. And how I reacted, I felt relief. I felt calm, because that is a normal response when your abuser dies. When the person that's been stalking you and harassing you, making fake profiles to watch all your stuff on social media and join your Patreon and spy on you, and getting other people to spy on you to get information about them, and going through your mail and not taking no for an answer. When someone who's been harassing and stalking you for years and has zero respect for your boundaries and has sabotaged your happiness for decades dies, you feel relief. I felt relief. Luckily, I did, because I was the one who had to take care of everything. And then I cleaned their house. And then I found myself once again in the house I escaped 2 years ago, living with my abusive father, who I had got no contact with years ago. Most people don't understand how narcissists work, how they are angels outside the house to present an image to the world of how good they are, and then come home and are a completely different person, and they will absolutely destroy their target. So many people came up to me at the funeral and told me of how my mother was such a good person, and was so nice and kind and caring and gave me all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And they would even tell me, oh, your mother loved you so much. And I would smile and I would say, okay. And I would hug them, because I didn't want to argue with them, because I knew it wasn't about me. It was about, they are also grieving. They're grieving the version of her that they thought she was. And this is not the time to try to convince them otherwise, and just to allow them to believe that that's who she was. So, I would just accept whatever they were saying and hug them and let them express themselves. I was really surprised at my ability to not be triggered, not be upset. I was at so much peace. I'm sure I was getting help, like divine help, because I was in so much peace and my heart was so open, and all I could see was everyone around me and how nice they were. The thing that I realized was that the people that my mother talked the most shit about behind their backs were the nicest, sweetest, most open-hearted people. But they didn't know that side of her, and I didn't want to burst their bubble. But then a couple of people who were close to my mother tried to convince me that my mother loved me, because they were the closest. She had given them the sob story, right? Poor me. Oh, my baby daughter's gone. I'm so sad. So that's what they believed. That's what they thought she felt. They thought, if only Natasha knew that her mother loved her so much, she's just got it wrong. She's got it wrong. Let's not ask her why she did what she did and feels the way she does. Let's not let her explain her experience. Let's just keep gaslighting her and telling her that she's wrong about her experience because her mother told me she loves her. So the people who crammed that down my throat, it's really only a couple, they were the ones that I ended up telling them the truth. No, I'm sorry, but she fooled you. When someone loves you, they don't do the things that my mother did. Okay? When someone loves you, they don't sabotage your own life. My mother was a liar, a manipulator, and an abuser. She told everyone, and the thing that I think woke a lot of people up was the fact that my mother had convinced them all that my father had Alzheimer's. My mother had convinced so many people that my father had debilitating Alzheimer's and couldn't survive without her and needed a conservatorship, and that he was going to die soon. That's what she convinced people of. And when they saw him at the funeral, I think some people may have recognized that my father does not have Alzheimer's, is not half dead, and definitely doesn't need a conservatorship. So hopefully that planted a seed where they're going to start to recognize that my mother was a liar and a manipulator and a gaslighter and an abuser, and that I left and stopped talking to her for a reason. And I'm not sad about her death for a reason. Because, yes, she bought you things. Okay, she was nice to you. But behind closed doors, that's not who she was. That's not who she was. The weirdest part of all of this is that because of my apparent mediumship abilities, I am getting two different versions of her. There's the version of her that I know in reality, with my memories, who she really was in this reality. And then there's the version of her that I'm getting on the other side, the version of her that is abundantly happy, that has let go of all the shit that was keeping her in such a angry, negative, manipulative vibe down here. And that's something that I've been trying to adapt to because it is trippy. But it's also probably the thing that has helped me the most to release my anger and forgive her, because I recognize that who she was here was a character that she played in this reality. You know, everything that was done still was real, but now she is a different version of herself. And that version of herself is also real. It's very trippy. But seeing her now crossed over as someone who recognizes that they made mistakes here and has tried to orchestrate some kind of like redemption situations, which was interesting. But to see that her on the other side recognizes that what she did here was not the best is interesting. It's interesting. And again, I think that's what helped me the most to let go of whatever anger that I may have still been holding on to, or to help forgive her. It's been an experience. It's been an experience. I think I'm going to talk about the woo-woo part of this on my other channel, Natasha Hynes, on YouTube. It'll probably be linked in the description or the pinned comment in this video. So I realized that this was a very long video. If you've been watching to the end, thank you. I really just needed to get this out. Thanks.